Yes, people, what's happening? Welcome back to Chelsea Fan TV and welcome to another episode of the Chelsea Fan TV podcast. Before we get into today's episode, guys, make sure you smash the likes on this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already and leave your thoughts in the comments below, whether you agree or disagree about anything we've discussed in today's show. And there's plenty to get stuck into. As always, Chelsea back in action after the World Cup for the first time. Final game of the year. There's plenty of transfer news to get into as well. Enzo Fernandez, a new right back possibly as well, the injury to Reece James. So just going to get straight into it. As always, joined by Lewis. Bro, great to have you again. Let's start with a Bournemouth game, mate. Obviously, wasn't the best game. We were both there. But the most important thing was just to get the 3 points. Bournemouth weren't great. They had a few moments, and a better team probably would have punished us, if we're being perfectly honest. But for Chelsea, you know, 4 defeats in the last 5 games before the World Cup. The most important thing was just to get the win. And I guess whilst the performance wasn't great, it's the best one we've seen in quite a long time.
Yeah, I kind of echo a lot of what you're saying on this. Like, it's good to win, and I want to be positive about it, but the way that we played didn't really inspire me too much. I saw a few patterns of play. We were playing down the right-hand side a lot more, trying to feed the ball into the box to Havertz, minimize his touches in the box, and it worked. But now we've lost Reece James. I don't know if we're going to be able to be as devastating on the right-hand side as we looked in that game. Our play fell apart before Reece James even came off. Like, after the first 30 minutes, we took our foot off the gas pedal where we realistically should have been killing them off. And after the injury, they started just running through that right side. It went from being our best asset to being our most exposed hole that they were just running through the whole time. And I feel like a better team in the top 10 probably comes back from that game. So it doesn't really fill me with the most of confidence, but it was good to get a win. Maybe it's confidence building towards the players. We should be getting a result against Forest too, but I'm not jumping to any conclusions off that game. Nowhere near.
Definitely not. I mean, there's not an awful lot to talk about, but there's a couple of talking points. Let's start with one big positive I felt, and I'm sure you feel the same as well. Dennis Zakaria, perhaps a surprise starter against Bournemouth. I don't think many Chelsea fans expected him to feature from the beginning, but he did. And again, as he has done so in his previous outings against Zagreb, not so much in the League Cup against City, but I felt he was really, really good. And I think, if I'm being honest, I think he deserves to start against Forest as well. I mean, how impressed were you by him?
I thought it was good to have that profile in the squad. Helped us defensively a lot. Even had a good presence in the offensive box. He got a good amount of touches there. Just needed a bit more composure. Felt his passing was a bit sloppy at times, though. In some aspects, it was good. In some aspects, it was like, I need you to be a little bit more switched on. But it was still positive. I'd still start him. I feel like we're getting the best out of Jorginho with Zakaria next to him, for example. And it's good to have that profile in the squad too. But again, need to see a little bit more. But it's good to see us building a little bit more of a base.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, you know, as you say, that profile does make a big difference. And actually, I was impressed with how often he kind of found himself in that attacking third of the pitch as well. You know, he gets forward well, right? His shooting, not the best. There was a good opportunity in the second half where he sent it straight over. But, you know, I just think that energy and that physicality he brings in the middle of the park is a profile that we're missing at the moment. And obviously, we're going to look to address that in the forthcoming windows. A couple of other players I just wanted to briefly touch on before we move on. Mason Mount's obviously divided opinion this season. You know, he's not had the greatest of seasons. I think that's perfectly fair to say. But actually, seeing him deployed in that number 8 position, or kind of a free roaming 10, as it were, we kind of saw the best of him again. I'm not saying, you know, this was an unbelievable performance or anything, but compared to what we have seen from him in the first part of the season, particularly in the last few games before the World Cup, this was a lot better. And I think it again highlights to me that I don't want to see Mason Mount in a front three. If we're playing a pivot system, he has to be on the bench because his best position is that number 8 or that kind of free roaming 10 that he picked up against Bournemouth. I mean, mate, do you agree on that? Do you think for you, Mount, if it's a back 3 system we go with, there's not really a space for him in the team?
He always gets shoehorned into these lineups anyway. That's the main issue with him. I thought he was good yesterday. I thought still would have wanted to see a little bit more. Like there was some overhit passes, there was some where I thought his decision making could have been a little bit better. I don't want to jump to conclusions over a lot of these performances, but it did look a lot better. He looked a lot more comfortable in that position. He was connecting the midfield to the attack a lot better. And him being a bit deeper means we don't have to rely on him spamming the shoot button as much as he usually does. But even then, he still kind of overdid it a bit too much. I want to see him in the 8 a bit more. I'm not going to jump to any mad statements about it, but it was promising. It was promising. I just want to see a little bit more from that.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, going from promising to something that's not promising at all is the fact that Reece James has picked up another injury. It's to the same knee that ruled him out for best part of 2 months, missing the World Cup as well. And, his first game back, he looks really good. You can tell how much of a difference he makes to our side and how reliant we are on him in order to kind of perform well. I mean, all the games that he missed before the World Cup, we only won one of those games, and it was the one at Villa Park, which actually we're pretty lucky to win that anyway. So his importance to the team is so obvious. I know hindsight's easy and it's fine to look back on it now, but I was saying beforehand that I personally wouldn't have started him in this game, knowing that he's been out for so long. He played 50 minutes against Brentford at Cobham, which that intensity is completely different to the Premier League. And even Potter beforehand saying in his comments, he's got to build Reece James back up, and the Premier League's not the ideal place to do that. I think I get why he started, because he's so important to this team and we're desperate for results. But at the same time, I think when someone's coming back from an injury like that, it perhaps would have been better to just bed him in, give him like 20 minutes, half an hour from the bench and gradually build his minutes up over the coming games. But I do also understand that we desperately need results and he's our best player. So if he's ready to go, then he's got to go. I mean, do you think it's just unlucky, or do you feel that actually perhaps he shouldn't have started and we've kind of rushed him back?
I don't know. I'm hearing two different sides to this. Apparently Reece was ready to play, but I saw his trainer post something on Instagram saying he was holding his tongue because he has a lot that he wants to get off his chest. If Reece was even 99% ready, he shouldn't have started, or he should have been off as soon as we got to half-time, because 2-0, you can hold that and play a bit more defensive. And we showed that in the game anyway. Bournemouth were not good enough to come back. We just weren't good enough to kill the game off either. I don't know, because we have a weird pattern of rushing players back too early, like we saw with Chilwell before the Zagreb home game, where we played him for the full 90 and he was literally training with an ice pack on his thigh.
It was on his hamstring, wasn't it, or something? Yeah.
Yeah, it's hamstring. So I don't know. It's too speculative. But if he was not 100% fit, then either Potter or the training staff have let him down. And someone needs to be held accountable to that, because we have him for 7 years. We can't afford to keep risking this guy. We keep bringing him back from injury too early. We keep over-relying on him, and it's just forcing him into more injuries. And the more you do that, the more injury-prone the player's going to be. We can't be having Reece James turn into an injury croc when we have him for 6 years. We have to be able to manage him better. That's why we have to get a right back.
I think, that's another thing as well. I think there would be more of a, from Potter, there'll be more emphasis on him to perhaps play someone else if there was like a better option available. I'm not saying that Azpilicueta couldn't have done a job against Bournemouth, but if there was someone that had a bit more quality and was a little bit closer to Reece James's level, then I think in this sort of game you'd be like, well, actually, I'll just chuck them in and give Reece a few minutes from the bench. Of course, he could have got injured coming off the bench. There's no guarantees that wouldn't have happened either. But I'll just look at a bigger picture, and I just think, in the last 4 games, if you include the 2 friendlies we've had as well, we've picked up 4 injuries. We picked up an injury in each of the last 4 games. We had obviously Ruben away at Newcastle, then Brojo's ACL against that friendly against Villa. Then had Fofana, a reoccurrence of that same injury that kept him out for so long in that game against Brentford at Cobham. And now Reece James had a reoccurrence of his same injury that kept him out for 2 months. At what point, for me, this doesn't become bad luck anymore. This is a recurring theme. And you've got, again, it could be purely speculative, but when this is happening so frequently and 2 players have suffered setbacks in their recoveries from the same injury, plus Kante suffered a big setback as well from his original injury, that's 3 key players that are suffering injury setbacks when they're supposedly recovered from their injury. Do you think there's kind of a fundamental problem potentially with the rehab Chelsea are doing, or the quality of the medical staff, or something along those lines? Because this shouldn't be happening as frequently as it happens for us at the moment.
I don't know, because again, it's very speculative, but it doesn't look good. Fofana was meant to be back before the World Cup, didn't even make it to after the World Cup, and now he's got another injury. Reece James, we know the situation with him. Kante, to be honest, that's more just Kante's body. Chilwell, we saw the pictures. He shouldn't have played the full 90. That game was meaningless anyway. There was no reason to play him for that long. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot, and it doesn't look good on our fitness team. Maybe they are rushing players back too early. Maybe we're so worried about results that we're risking it. But regardless, whoever's in charge of making those decisions, they have a lot that they need to be accountable for. If that's the case, of course.
Yeah, of course. But I get it from both points of view, because a player is, unless they physically, can't move, they're always going to say that, I'm ready to play, I'm ready to play.
Exactly.
And it's quite hard to then, I think it takes like a strong personality as a manager, as a management team to be like, and as a medical team, be like, look, actually, Reece, I'm not saying this has happened, but you need to just hold fire a little bit. You're not quite ready. We suggest you start from the bench. I'm sure the medical team must communicate with Potter and his coaching staff and say, look, we think Reece is ready for X amount of minutes. But if you speak to the player, they're always going to say that they're ready to play. So I get it, it's difficult. And as you said, we need results. So if we're doing well, it's much easier to leave Reece James out the starting lineup against Bournemouth. But the fact that we're not doing well, it makes that decision a lot more difficult. But what it does do, moving ahead to the transfer market, is that we have to get a right back in this window because, I know the club were looking at doing that in the summer, getting by with Azpilicueta as cover for the second half of the season. But now that Reece James is out for another month, it's probably going to be 5 or 6 weeks before we see him actually properly playing again. That accelerates
the need for him to be bedded back into the team properly,
exactly.
Not just straight in for a full 90.
Well, this is it. So you look at it and you think, right, we need a new right back now. Names kind of doing the rounds. I mean, I don't know an awful lot about these players, but Malo Gusta at Lyon, don't know an awful lot about him other than the fact he was decent on Football Manager. He's got good numbers. But the main one seems to be Juranovic, the Celtic right back. Obviously done very well for Croatia in the World Cup. Reports saying he could be available for as little as £8 million. That would represent, I think, a good piece of business. But again, we see them do it on the world stage for Croatia, but the step up from the SPL to the Premier League is huge. I mean, do you know much about Juranovic, mate? What are your thoughts on bringing a new right back in? Because realistically, we need someone that's, obviously there's hardly any players that are as good as Reece James, but we need someone close to that level. We don't want like a clear 1 and 2. We almost need like 2 first choices with how many games we play, and at the moment, how many games that Reece misses.
I've always been saying that we are probably not going to get a player of Reece's quality because they're just not going to accept being a number 2 to him. But you have to try and find someone, or at least 2 right backs who can accommodate one defensively, one offensively. For me, Juranovic, he's had a good World Cup. I think his numbers are good defensively, but offensively, they're not that great. We've been linked to Malo Gusto. From what I've seen, his numbers are a lot better. I'd bring him in if we could. Dumfries has come around, but I don't want him. Inter Milan fans take the mick out of him every time. And it just sounds like it sounds like a stupid deal to make. He's more of a tournament player, if anything. But even then, that's why I can't really judge Juranovic too much, because is he a tournament player or can he play in the Premier League too? I don't know. Regardless, whoever we bring in, I'm not going to mind as long as they're not a total bum. And we just have to wait and see on that one. But I don't expect to get a player of Reece James's quality anyway.
Oh, no chance. And I think, January's hard to do business anyway, and clubs will know when we come calling for a right back that we're desperate. And that, again, that drives the price up because we're going to have to pay a premium because we're in a desperate situation. But moving away from the right back area, which definitely has to be sorted out this window, midfield is another area that needs to be addressed. And a lot of talk is beginning around Enzo Fernandez. Obviously had a fantastic World Cup with Argentina. He only joined Benfica 6 months ago from River Plate for 10 million euros. He's got a release clause of 120 million euros. Benfica are saying, Rui Costa, the president, coming out today and saying that, they'll entertain offers for Enzo Fernandez if the release clause is met. So it's very simple for suitors: pay the release clause. Otherwise, we're not entering into conversations. Chelsea according to reports, would rather pay a little bit more than the release clause, like they did with Nkunku, in order to get more preferable structure of the payments, because of the 120 million euros up front is a bit of a worry for FFP. On Enzo Fernandez, mate, obviously a great player. My only concern, and like perhaps it's not that just, is the fact that, 6 months ago, I'm not saying that just because no one's heard of you doesn't mean you're a good player, but 6 months ago, no one had really heard of this guy. 10 million quid from River Plate, goes to Benfica. He's played 24 games for them, and now suddenly, he's people prepared to pay maybe 120 million quid for him. I'm not saying he's a bad player, but again, the step up from Portugal to the Premier League is quite big. Yes, the success rate from the Portuguese league to the Premier League with signings has been pretty good, but I sense Chelsea potentially moving in January as more of an opportunistic move rather than, because I think if it goes to the summer and we don't have Champions League football next season and the teams like Real Madrid, Liverpool, etc. are interested, we can forget getting the player. I think it's one of those where we have to get him now or it's not going to happen for us. But
now top four as well. I will like that.
Yeah. But what are your thoughts on Enzo Fernandez? And do you agree with me, mate? Do you think if we're going to get the player, we have to do it this window? Otherwise, we can just forget it.
Yeah, it has to be done this window because UCL tax might not be a big factor for us, but it will be a factor in whatever club he picks next. In terms of the player, a lot of people were talking about him before the World Cup and before he even moved to Benfica. It's just I didn't really know too much about the player or watch him personally. But from what I've seen at the World Cup, from what I've researched with him, he is exactly the profile of midfielder that we need. Someone who's a ball winner, but can also dictate play, who can also direct passes, spray them out wide, or be able to play them further forward as well. We lack that. We lack creativity from the midfield. We have ball winners, but we don't have the final ball in there at all. And Enzo Fernandez would fix that for us. I think it's a massive move for us if we bring him in. I would easily bring him in if the opportunity arose for us. Yeah, I don't really like the fact that you're paying over 100 million, but for the age of the player, for what he's done already, and for where his ceiling is going to be, I think it's an investment that is worth paying the money for. So I would go in for him personally.
Yeah, look, it's a lot of money, whatever way you look at it. It's like 105 million pounds, 120 million euros. Chelsea would rather pay a little bit more, as I said, to structure the payment terms in a more favourable way towards them. But I don't know. Like, I think, great player. But for me, ideally we get both. We'd get Declan Rice and Fernandez, and that's the midfield sorted for like the next 10 plus years potentially. But I don't know if we've got the money to bring both of those players in. Players would have to be moved on. Maybe we're not going to get any money for Jorginho necessarily, but I think, if Enzo came in and we got Declan Rice in the summer, which I think is definitely the plan, then you're looking at players like Gallagher probably be moved on. Loftus-Cheek, probably the end for him. Financial fair play does exist. Mate, do you expect to fund this move for Enzo, that players like Gallagher and Loftus-Cheek probably be sold in the summer?
Gallagher maybe not, but if an offer comes in, you never know. Loftus-Cheek I could see leaving. Kante I could see leaving. Jorginho I could see leaving. I'd hold my breath on Mason Mount, depending on the contract negotiations as well. But it is what it is with all of them. We need to move on from Jorginho and Kante. Ruben is a bench player, and I'm fine with him being in that role, but he's on 150k a week too, so that doesn't really work itself out financially. Mason Mount, I still don't want him on 200k plus. He needs to perform a lot more consistently and to a much higher level before he even gets that sort of amount personally. But yeah, I don't mind anyone leaving for Enzo Fernandez personally, except maybe Kovacic. But even Kovacic isn't really sure whether he wants to stay at Chelsea or not. So it could even be him. But regardless, whoever needs to make way for Enzo, make way. Because Enzo Fernandez is one for the future, and he's someone who I want at Chelsea immediately.
I mean, there's a chance that a lot of midfield players, even as we know, Jorginho and Kante are probably both going to go. Ruben and Kovacic are both out of contract at the end of next season, so summer 24. So they've got about 18 months left on the contracts. Not really sure what the future holds for both of them. There have been reports saying that Kovacic might be looking for a new challenge. I don't know if Ruben is going to stay on or not. As you say, I'm happy for him to stay if he's a squad player, a bit of a bench player. But does he want that? Does he see himself playing regularly somewhere else. So there's some big decisions to be made. But mate, before we move on to the Forest game, if you had a choice between the two of them, Fernandez or Rice, who would you rather have?
For me, I'm still going Enzo Fernandez because I just think he offers a little bit more. Rice is more of a ball progressor, someone who'll drive the ball forward and maybe have a good final ball, but his forward passing still needs a bit more work. For 70 million, I'd still bring in Declan Rice. You could bring him in with Enzo Fernandez. I'd be fine with that. But yeah, if you're picking one or the other, I'm going Enzo Fernandez personally. I think he just offers me a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, the dream would be to get both of them, of course. I mean, that could still be possible. But for me, I'd edge slightly more towards Declan Rice, not because I think he's necessarily a much better player than Fernandez, but in terms, for me, money, he's cheaper by probably 30, 40 million quid, which is quite a lot when you bring into account FFP rules that we've got to apply to. And the big one for me is, I'm not saying that Enzo Fernandez hasn't got the ability to adapt, but we know that Declan Rice is Premier League proven. He knows the league inside out, and that for me is a massive plus. Yes, playing for Chelsea will be slightly different than playing for West Ham, but I think that Premier League experience is really, really important. The Portuguese,
I don't know, man.
You don't know.
I see it as more like, to me, Premier League proven's always been more of a buzzword to me. It all depends on the system because it's about roles. It's about how you fit your position. And to me, Rice would be great as just a ball progressor. But other than in terms of sitting deep, even West Ham don't necessarily use him like that. They more use Souček in that role and they have him move further forward. Enzo could be more of a sitter for us. So play them together, but in terms of their all-round ability, I think Enzo's just a much better passer. Tackling, you could probably say they're more even at, but I think he's just more well-rounded. He's going to offer me more going forward, and he's going to benefit the team a lot more.
Yeah, look, there's not an awful lot in it. By the way, guys, do let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you can only have one, would you rather have Rice or Enzo Fernandez? But yeah, look, it's going to be interesting to see how this story develops. As we've said, Chelsea, if they want to get Fernandez, I think they're going to have to act in this window, because once it goes to the summer and he's got his pick of teams, the fact that we probably won't have Champions League football next season almost puts us straight out the race. So we have to act now and get the deal done. Just lastly on this, mate, would you take a deal like with Nkunku? Would you sign Fernandez now if it meant he couldn't come right now, but it meant he guaranteed him for next to come in the summer?
Yep.
Or you take that. Yeah.
100%. Just secure the transfer quickly, because it's going to be about who pays that release clause first. And I think Benfica as well said you need to pay the release clause by January or we're not selling the player. So they're rushing it. So might as well do it now.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite simple. You want the player, you pay the release clause. I know it's a lot of money, but yeah, I think we need. I'm the same as you. I'd take us signing him now, but he stayed on loan at Benfica for the rest of the season or something like that. Just as long as we get the player, that's the most important thing. But mate, let's move ahead then. Obviously, first game of the new year on Sunday, New Year's Day, away at Forest. How do you see this one? I mean, for me, we have to win this game. We need to get those points on the board, because January we've got City coming up twice. We've got Liverpool. We've got away games at Fulham. Tough games to get stuck into. And obviously we're going to be without Reece James for all of those. So it's really important we pick up as many points as we can before we head into those City and Liverpool games. Forest away will be tough. Forest, obviously, whilst away from home, are terrible. At home, they have been a little bit better. They're still down the bottom of the table, but they have beaten Liverpool at the City ground. This will be a tough game, won't it?
We'll always make it tough. I think we should still get a result in this game, but it all depends on how Forest play. If they sit deep, it might be a bit harder for us. Bournemouth didn't necessarily sit back against us. They were a lot more playing on the front foot, and I think that benefited us a lot more. If Forest play that way, should definitely get 3 points. If they sit deep a bit more, I don't know. But even without that, losing Reece James is going to be a massive blow to us. And I know our performance is going to dip as a result. So I can't guarantee a win, but we should still be winning.
I mean, in terms of systems, lineups, changes, I mean, how many changes do you expect from the Bournemouth game? Obviously, Potter confirming that Kovacic and Ziyech will be back in the frame. For you, do they both go in and start?
Kovacic would go back in. I wouldn't mind Actually, to be honest, I don't think there'd be too much changes in the starting lineup. Maybe the Reece James one, obviously, but other than that, I don't think anybody else would get switched. Because the performance was good enough that I think everybody retains their positions. And I also think Potter needs to stick to a select formation and like build cohesion within a starting 11. So I wouldn't make too many changes.
I mean, just on one guy we didn't discuss earlier, do you think that, and I've called for, and a lot of Chelsea fans have, for Christian Pulisic to get a consistent run of games, had a good World Cup, he did well in the build-up before the World Cup. Do you think he's done enough against Bournemouth to keep his place in the side? I mean, I felt he was okay, but I don't know, I just expected a little bit more from him in that game the other night.
I did say he needs to get given time to play himself into form, so I wouldn't bench him after one game, but I do want to see a bit more from him too. I thought he was beating players well, but then he was over-dribbling in certain situations. There was some instances where it was just the wrong decision, but I do think more game time will get better decisions out of him. But if he isn't as impactful in the Forest game, then I would drop him because Man City's next and we can't afford any passengers.
No, we certainly can't on that front. Would you stick with the back four system as well? I mean, to be honest, with Reece James out, I mean, Azpilicueta is going to be better suited to playing as a right back anyway, rather than a right wing back. We know he doesn't get forward that well. So does that pretty much make a decision for us? Let's just stick with the same system.
Yeah, if anything, I think we play better in the back four anyway than when we do in the back five. I might switch Koulibaly for Chalobah because he looked a little bit sloppy. But other than that, I wouldn't make any other changes.
No, I don't think there's a need to make that many changes. It's not like, there's not, to be honest, there's not an awful lot of difference, I don't think, between Bournemouth and Forest as teams. Yes, away from home, you might want to be a little bit more defensively solid, but for me, there's not a lot of difference in quality between the two sides. We should have more than enough to win, and I think going with that, I agree. I'd pretty much go with the same team. Obviously, Azpilicueta comes in, but otherwise, yes, you say maybe Chalobah could come in at the back, but ultimately, I don't really think there needs to be that many changes. Maybe Kovacic comes in for Zakaria, although I'd be tempted to, again, bed Kova in, give him some minutes, like start him from the bench and then bring him on just to build him back up. He has played a lot of football, started all 7 of Croatia's games. But yeah, I don't think there's too many changes that need to be made. And it is a game that, I know right now we can't take any games for granted and expect to win them, but Chelsea away at Forest, you would expect us to win. But the situation we're in at the moment, it makes it, I don't feel confident really going into any games. But I mean, last thing to wrap up, mate, what are your thoughts on a score prediction for Sunday?
Let's say 2-0 again. Jorginho penalty. And let's say Pulisic.
Yeah, I mean, make back-to-back clean sheets, that would be nice considering how many goals you have been letting in. This will be tough, but I do fancy us. I think we'll probably concede, but I'm going to go for a 2-1 Chelsea win. I think Sterling might score, and I'll go with Thiago Silva as well. Why not?
Let's go.
Yeah, let's go, guys. Well, seems like a good place to round out the episode. Please make sure you smash the likes on the video. Subscribe to Chelsea Fan TV if you haven't done so already. And check out Carefree Lewis G and check out my channel as well, the Blues Brothers. Feel free to subscribe to both of those channels. And we will catch you again in another episode. Take care, guys.